When thinking of the most important players in the justice system, it is common to jump straight to individuals such as judges, prosecutors, and police investigators. However, there is one position that contains essentially unrestricted power to present to juries their own beliefs and assumptions about crime scene evidence as fact, often making them the pivotal witnesses in murder trials. This same power also allows them to indefinitely delay or completely undercut investigations into suspicious deaths that happen within their jurisdiction. The Department of Justice website defines the role of forensic scientists as to examine and analyze evidence from crime scenes and elsewhere to develop objective findings that can assist in the investigation and prosecution of perpetrators of crime or absolve an innocent person from suspicion. This series will delve into a few especially strange cases that were led by forensic examiner Dr. Erik K. Mitchell in order to illustrate the true power that this position holds. Erik Mitchell has had a long and turbulent career as a medical examiner, spanning over 3 decades in multiple states. During his career, he has made headlines for his controversial decisions and questionable ethics, the likes of which have caused many innocent people to be convicted for crimes they did not commit, as well as other cases where Mitchell's inefficiency and indecision has allowed for investigations to go cold, where Mitchell has either closed a case before an investigation played out, or waited too long to make a ruling about the death, and by the time he finally did, all of the leads had dried up, leaving the victim's family without closure. In many of these cases, the family is inevitably left wondering what really happened to their loved one, and since then have spent many years searching for answers. In 1991, restaurant owner Walid Daniel was accused of drowning his wife, Yvette. Initially, it was believed only Yvette and their child were home at the time.
It was a case that grabbed the community's attention. A Palestinian immigrant, Yvette Matar Daniel, who spoke very little English, drowned in her own bathtub. Her infant daughter, apparently the only one home at the time. Roadblocks were set up near their old Liverpool Road home back in June 1991 as investigators searched for clues that would lead them to Yvette's killer. Her husband, Walid Daniel, the owner of Just Desserts coffee shop in the Money Towers, proclaiming his innocence.
They had a downstairs tenant who heard some kind of noise around 3 o'clock, but he wasn't sure what it was. It was sort of a made-for-TV mystery.
But within days of the crime, Walid Daniel was arrested for killing his wife.
The medical office was divided over whether it was accidental or if there was foul play. Erik Mitchell believed it was a homicide, but at least 3 of his colleagues disagreed, and even went so far as to publicly accuse Erik Mitchell of committing perjury for claiming the death was a homicide. District Attorney William Fitzpatrick recused himself from the trial due to an undisclosed conflict of interest. At this time, the investigation into Erik Mitchell's office had become a public frenzy. Edward Mencken, who served as a special prosecutor in place of Fitzpatrick at Daniel's trial, said, quote, "I wasn't sure if I was reading about the indictment of Walid Daniel or the indictment of Erik Mitchell." The jury reached its decision in only 4 hours.
After about 2 weeks of trial, the jury deliberated barely 4 hours and reached its verdict around 10 at night.
The note came in, and Judge Burke was sort of startled. He was surprised.
To watch the reaction of Walid Daniel when it was announced in his family. His sisters started crying and started jumping at him and wanted to hold on to him, didn't want the officers to take him away, and they were grabbing him by the legs and by the chest and by the foot.
Mencken says he had no doubts then, and none now, that Walid Daniel killed his wife.
Walid Daniel was convicted of murder in 1992 and was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. In 2008, Walid Daniel's attorneys filed a motion for a retrial claiming that Erik Mitchell committed perjury during his testimony. And the motion also claims that Daniel's attorneys had new evidence that it claimed was proof of his innocence. In 2009, the court denied the request, and a new trial was never granted. The judge's decision noted, "The court is of the opinion that the impact of such evidence in this case would not create any reasonable doubt as to this defendant's guilt in a reasonable juror's mind. In September 2018, Walid Daniel was granted parole and was released from prison after serving 26 years behind bars.
But the killer now walks the streets again, a free man.
As for Erik Mitchell, he was forced to step down from his role in Syracuse in 1993, rather than face criminal charges for the 144 misdemeanors and 3 felonies he was being investigated for. The investigation was also due in part to the complaints against Mitchell made by at least 17 of his employees. For reference, the medical examiner's office and the county laboratory only has a combined 26 total employees. Lawyer Richard Langone, who had represented Hector Rivas at one point, noted in court that, quote, "For almost a decade, the Onondaga County Medical Examiner's Office pervasively and systematically engaged in the practice of fabricating and mischaracterizing evidence for the purpose of obtaining convictions." There were many disturbing allegations that came out of the investigation of Erik Mitchell's office, including the improper removal of organs. In simple terms, Erik Mitchell was accused of doing what he wanted with the bodies in the morgue, rather than respect the wishes of the families. Mitchell removed the organs from at least 3 children for research purposes, despite the fact that the victims' families refused to give consent. He sent away organs from hundreds of bodies, and the report noted that up to 95% of the families did not agree to consent. At least 4 former employees say Mitchell instructed them to dice up organs so they could be flushed down the toilet and sink. He also had employees boil human bones in the parking lot of the medical examiner's office. He held skeletons in the morgue long past the dates they were due to be buried, a violation of court orders and public health laws. He was also accused of financial improprieties. Then there was the set of photographs that surfaced showing convicted sex offenders posing with dead bodies in Mitchell's office. There were also photos of employees doing playful poses with the body of a suicide victim. Strangely enough, Erik Mitchell also buried body parts and human remains on his own farm property. The investigation into Erik Mitchell's office confirmed many of the allegations. District Attorney William Fitzpatrick said, quote, "He went too far. An autopsy patient is not the personal property of the doctor performing the same." Fitzpatrick told Mitchell's lawyers that if Erik Mitchell resigns, then the criminal investigation would end. County Executive Nicholas Pirro confirmed that he asked Mitchell to quit because of the findings in the investigation and because of the ongoing health department probe of Erik Mitchell's office. Erik Mitchell officially resigned from his post in Syracuse in 1993 after a decade of work. He ruffled many feathers in those years, but his days of controversy were far from over. He relocated to Kansas, where Erik Mitchell's pattern of problematic cases was only getting started.